everybody, and hello YouTube. Welcome back to another fabulous pre-show tarot reading here at That Witch Podcast. I'm Dani. I'm that witch next door. Welcome to my witchy neighborhood. I am so excited to get to read for you today. Today that you are hearing this, it's gonna be Friday, January 14th. So what I want you to do is make sure that you feel wherever you're sitting, wherever you're standing, make sure that your weight feels nice and evenly distributed. You've got both feet planted firmly on the ground, if at all possible. You feel very rooted and connected to the earth and to this very present physical moment. Now, if you feel so called, you can close your eyes and go ahead and take a deep breath in with me. Exhale that out. And really open yourself up to any messages, any advice, any guidance or insight that you may be needing right now. It's a doozy. It's a lot. It's a lot of cards. Okay, let's make sense of this beautiful mess. Right off of the bat, Emperor reversed. Shocker, not shocker, that in the midst of so many Saturnian themes and energies right now, a lot of Capricorn energy, a lot of Aquarius energy. We're entering into even more Aquarius energy. Don't forget that Aquarius, traditionally, before Uranus was discovered, is traditionally ruled by Saturn. So Aquarius is co-ruled by Saturn and Uranus. So Aquarius still brings in very, very strong Saturnian themes. And the Emperor has always screamed Saturn energy to me, and really a lot of Capricorn energy, but in its purest form. It really, really reminds me so much of Saturn. When we have the Emperor reversed, we are looking at themes of really unethical authority. We are looking at toxic leadership, okay? Think about somebody in power letting it all go to their head, letting it totally corrupt them. This is Emperor reversed. Now, I'm going to run through these. We're going to bring it all back in together, okay? Because there's a lot of cards today. Two of Cups reversed. Again, I feel like we had Two of Cups reversed not nearly that long ago. We have an internal emotional battle going on that we are fighting. We are fighting between two concepts, two constructs, two different philosophies that we may have that are really, really conflicting. This actually makes a lot of sense coming post-reversed Emperor, because with Saturn and Aquarius, though Saturn traditionally does rule Aquarius, there is kind of a natural and inherent tension between these energies, between Saturn and Aquarius. Saturn having a lot of restriction, a lot of discipline, a lot of pattern, a lot of tradition. And Aquarius bringing in a lot of those opposite themes of rebellion, revolution, nonconformity, moving forward and away from tradition, specifically non-traditional ideas, okay? And so when these are together, when we think about Saturn in general, when we think about Aquarius in general, we really do see a natural, inherent inner tension and battle taking place. However, I will say, very, very fascinating. I will say that we've got King of Pentacles upright and Wheel of Fortune upright as well. So really remember this duality, okay? The duality of being both anchored and really rooted and grounded in our experience, and very open-minded. Very open to experience new ideas, true, real progress and innovation, okay? King of Pentacles knows the value in this. King of Pentacles is so incredibly rooted and grounded, right? It's the earthiest of the earth, basically. And Pentacles, earth, grounding energy, also at the same time has this polar opposite duality of open-mindedness, of being very uprooted, if you will, okay? Wheel of Fortune brings in a lot of Saturnian themes as well, to be very honest with you. Think of those rings on Saturn and think of the wheel, okay? Think of cycles, think of patterns, think of phases, think of seasons, okay? These, well, Saturn, I'm grabbing the Emperor as if this is the planet Saturn and I was able to just grab it off of my table. That would be cool. Saturn and the wheel share a lot of those themes, okay? The data and the information that we can gather from our seasons, from our cycles, okay? And remembering that you really, really can get totally trapped and imprison yourself in that wheel, in your own cycles, okay? It's all about, Saturn is all about, and the wheel, especially upright like this. To me, the wheel is all about utilizing that energy, utilizing that sustaining energy of the ongoing inevitability of seasons and cycles and continuing concentric circles, right? That's why in the Wheel of Fortune, we see so many images of fixed energy, okay? Because there is this ongoing energy about this card, okay? Really, really, I do want to say, just kind of moving into, we have 2 reversed Knights in a row. We have reversed Knight of Cups and we have reversed Knight of Wands. Just take a look at these upright really quick in this deck. Really gorgeous. Look at the visual similarities of these Knights and how unique it is. I'm just purely talking about the artwork right now. Isn't that gorgeous? Just had to give a little shout out, a little appreciation. Okay. Biggest thing that we get from Knights that is beautifully depicted in these cards as well is that we are on the journey. We're still on the journey. There's a lot of movement in the Knights because we are very much in the process, on the path. Okay, there is a lot of movement here. What's interesting to me about getting these 2 in particular reversed, both the Wands and the Cups that we have are fire energy and our water energy, is these can both be extremely emotionally based energies. Obviously in the Cups, we have a lot of emotion, right? It's the Cups, it's water energy. But in fire, in the Wands, there's a lot of emotion as well because this is where our passion comes from. Our heart is in fire. And so there is a lot of emotional experience in the Wands and in fire as well. So this is really telling me, honestly, in this journey, I need you to know that you're totally letting your emotions control yourself. That's what I'm trying to say. You've been through the thick of it, and as we'll continue talking about through this, what I'm calling an integration year, okay? Because there's so many retrogrades happening this year, we will be really working on integrating and implementing and applying lessons and teachings. So I'm calling 2022 an integration year in general, because it's not a year about blazing the trail and going as fast and forward as you possibly can. It's not about that. That's not the vibe. I mean, you can go forward and do that, but I will tell you, it's a direct road to this, to serious, serious energetic and emotional burnout, okay? Where you're going to feel like you've been going and going and going, and you've been working so hard and for nothing and for nothing and for nothing. And the beauty, in my opinion, about the Knights when they are in their upright position is this fucking beautiful acceptance of the journey itself. The Knights when they're upright, the Knights when their energy is balanced, they don't get all pissy and prissy about the journey. They embrace it. They embrace the journey. They know the inevitability of the will. They know this infinite turning of the world and the universe and cycles and this continuum that our collective has. I will say that what is coming is going to test you energetically and emotionally. Specifically, it's going to test your ability to balance, truly tap in and balance your logic and practicality with your emotional experience. But this duo, Knight of Wands and Knight of Cups coming in reverse, this is totally being swept up by emotion. This is totally leaning into emotional experience, letting that cloud and determine every single decision and every single judgment that you make coming across your plate. And I'll tell you where that's going to get you. It's going to empty your cup. It's going to burn out your fuel. That's what happens in reversed cups and reversed wands, especially with the knights, I would say, because they're on the journey. And so they need their natural fuel, okay? They need their natural fuel. A Knight of Cups needs a nice full cup to propel, to really embody his full potential on his path and on his journey. Knight of Wands really needs to have that healthy stoking of the flame, okay? If Knight of Wands, if fire energy, if you just crank up the fire to full blast, guess what? It's gonna run out super duper fast, bro. That's not sustainable. That's not sustainable. The wheel is all about sustainability, okay? So, I'm serious. Don't burn out all your energy. We're about to come on our very first retrograde of 2022. The first of many, okay? Strap in a little bit. Strap in a little bit. Tap into that grounded nature. I really see the King of Pentacles coming in here as a really big superpower. Now, on a really dope note, I really like the last card of this reading that we got, which is the upright Six of Wands. Look at that energy. Ugh. Patrick Valenza, one day I hope you see this podcast and just know how much I love and appreciate your work, because this card just exudes aligned action. This is a leader in a heart-centered, pure form, okay? This is very, very evolved Leo. It's honestly a very evolved energy of all three of the fire signs, in my opinion, which is beautiful because this is a 6 and there's 3 signs, and I just like how all those numbers go together. But when we see harmony between Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius, when we see that, kind of Pokemon effect come to its highest evolution, what a beautiful, and I'm using this word very intentionally, trailblazing energy, trailblazing leadership, okay? Be the guiding light. That's what I really see this as. Listen, we have to experience, we have to experience this really toxic, unethical behavior. We have to go through this discomfort. We have to go through this inner dialogue and this battle, okay, that's making us question all of our emperor qualities. That's making us question the authority that we answer to and the authority that we create and demand ourselves. Okay? We are really meant to be questioning the living fuck out of this. The U.S. Pluto return, which we will talk about, that's Emperor reversed, okay? Pluto return in Capricorn, specifically Capricorn, Saturnian influence, anyone? That is uncovering the nasty, shitty, fucking dirt, bringing it up from the underworld, digging it up from where it's been swept under and buried and left behind, right? No more. It's unearthing and uncovering it. Is that going to bring about some inner battle? Yep, a lot of it. You are going to question things that you've done and things that you've believed your whole life. And baby, that's going to rock everyone's world. It's going to be a lot. And that's okay. That's okay. You really have been doing the work. King of Pentacles upright. This is tangible, grounded, earthly work. Like, I have done the work. I am a person that lives with intention. I act through mindfulness. I trust in that. I am grounded and present and aware and really grateful and humbled by I'm empowered and humbled by my experience. These are all big themes that the King of Pentacles brings us. This is the inherent superpower that you have cultivated. You built this. You worked for it. That's the best part about getting the Pentacles. It means you physically did the work. That's what I mean by this grounded, real, tangible superpower here. Okay? It might make you question goddamn everything, but come back to reality. What's here, what's now? You're going to have all these truths uncovered. All of this shit's going to come out into the light. Shit in your personal life, shit in the collective, in fucking society, globally. It's going to be big. It's going to be big. I'm also using the Pluto return, but this is a collective reading in general. I think there's themes of the Pluto return here, which mean, that's going to take place on a very big societal level in the U.S. specifically, obviously, because we're talking about the U.S.'s natal chart specifically. This is really, you know what I really saw this as from the moment we pulled this out? This is a big look ahead at this year, honestly. It sounds like a lot of you were really calling for and asking and seeking that kind of clarity, whether in general or from me specifically. But what really ended up coming through here today is a big overhead, look at what can we learn and understand now and take with us into 2022? Seriously. This is really, really important. Big, big stuff. This is a good reading to make sure that you hit the like button and you hit the subscribe button so that you never miss another reading, and maybe even save it and come back to it again. Now, we have quite the episode in store for you today. So without further ado, let's get after it. Our very own Ashley of Starseed Shadows that you all have gotten to know and absolutely love at our shadow chats every new moon cycle every month. She has officially launched her very own podcast. I am so fucking excited for Ashley. Her show sounds fucking amazing already. She has put so much incredible magic and wisdom into this show already. I cannot wait for all of you to hear it. So I know that all of you already adore her. Do not miss out on this. Go check it out. It's called The Goddess Complex. It is on all of your major platforms. Go check her out now, but I want you all to also spread the love for me, please. Share, shout this out to your friends, comment, make sure you go and follow Ashley. Do what you do best and go show your support. You amazing, amazing neighbors of mine. You are going to absolutely love her show. And Ash, I am just so excited for you and so, so proud of you. I love your show so much. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another week, another episode here at That Witch Podcast. I'm Dani. I'm That Witch Next Door. I'm your host, your guide, your mentor in all things magic, witchcraft, astrology, and witchy business. And I'm a little nervous about today, if I'm being honest. I'm not nervous. I wanted to take the opportunity to do an episode that was a little bit more personal. You know, I really am so naturally inclined to turn everything I do into a lesson, into a teaching opportunity. as very well represented and explained by my Saturn in my 5th house in Capricorn. So in all things, including the things I find the most fun and pleasurable, I find a way to turn it into a learning experience. Yay! I really do love the natural teachery qualities about myself. I definitely look at it as a little bit of a superpower that I have. But it definitely, one way that I notice that I really hold myself back with that is I forget to like really come on and share my own story, if you will. I always put my personality into everything. I'll throw my opinion into most things, but I really do have to remind myself to come on and tell my story so that I connect with more and more people. So one thing that I wanted to do, we've had tons of episodes out by now already. This is already episode 35, which just blows me away that we are at 35 episodes. But I felt like it's been a while since I've really talked about anything personally, and I've really never done a lot of an about me on the show, and honestly, not even that much on Instagram. There's a little bit on my website. You can go to my website to thatwitchnextdoor.com/about. I think that's the URL. Maybe it's about me and something like that. It's on the website. You can click on about. And I do share a lot of parts about my story, but I really forget to kind of bring that out into the light. So what I wanted to do today specifically, instead of necessarily giving you my life story on this episode, is I want to talk about a very specific part of my journey in light of this trend that is going around, which this trend goes around every year. There's so many people that I saw recently about the 10-year challenge, saying all kinds of goofy conspiracies about the 10-year challenge, which the conspiracies may totally be true. That's fine. I'm just saying that the 10-year challenge, we do this. It happens every year on Instagram and Facebook. So, but if you have not noticed for any reason, you might be tucked nice and cozy under your little rock, which, hey, more power to you. I love climbing under my rock too. It's a 10-year challenge. It usually happens every December or January. It got really big last year because it was, New Year. Sorry. I can't believe it's 2022. That really would have been 2 years ago when it got really, really big, when we were at the beginning of a fresh, brand new decade and saying goodbye to the past decade. So I want to talk about my 10-year challenge. I want to talk about that path for me from 2010 to 2020. We're going to have a little wiggle room in there. It's from roughly 10-ish years ago to about now, bringing you all up to speed. But the reason I really want to go into this specifically is because one of the biggest things that I get asked about the most off the show, off air, from listeners, from friends, from colleagues in the community is being a death witch. Now, we'll be talking more and more about death witchcraft and death magic. I have a very, very exciting episode coming up soon with one of my most dear friends, one of my most favorite people in the whole world, the lovely Sarah Marquez, who owns and runs CC Oddities by Sarah, which is spelled CERA. I'll link her in the show notes. I am going to do a really, really awesome death magic, death witch episode with her. But today what I want to do is kind of introduce you to this subject, to the topic, and more specifically talk about my connection and how I came into this path, why I practice what I practice, and kind of what death work has done and does for me. So, hi. again, I'm Dani. It's so nice to meet you. If this is the first time that you've ever listened to my show, welcome. I am a 31-year-old witch living in a suburb of Denver, Colorado. I have lived here my whole entire life. I've been purposefully practicing witchcraft for 7, almost 8 years. And I have been really intentionally studying astrology for 3.5, going on 4 years. And let's see, when I think about my path as a death witch and how I really came to this point, I guess where I will first take you is to a few years ago, not too long after my daughter was born. So my daughter is just over 3.5 years old. And I could probably trace this back to while I was pregnant, quite honestly. I've always struggled with anxiety. And what I had always assumed was a very commonly experienced fear of death. You know, I didn't think that there was anything out of the ordinary about any of the anxieties or fears or concerns that I had surrounding death. Okay. I'll be honest, I just totally made that assumption. I really didn't go around asking people. It's just one of those funny things that we do as humans. You know, think about what you've done, little things about yourself or certain mindsets that you've had where you just assumed it was normal. Not everyone did it, even though when you think about it, you're like, I don't know why I thought that because I've never talked about it to anybody. That's how my anxieties and fears around death was. I thought that very run of the mill. And in a lot of ways, I think that it was. But when I got pregnant, between the hormones on a very biological and physical level to a very big and profound emotional level of, you know, taking on this responsibility of giving life to another being and doing everything in your power to set them up for as much potential and success as possible. That's kind of a big undertaking. It absolutely triggered my anxieties to a completely new and heightened level that I hadn't experienced yet. And this definitely led me into postpartum depression, but more postpartum anxiety. There's videos of, you know, first moments of me with my daughter. And you can see, I couldn't feel it or sense it in the moment. You know, when I'm in these videos, I had no awareness of this. But looking back and watching myself, what I had thought was, quote unquote, normal motherly protection, right? Just trying to keep my kids safe. When I was looking back and looking at the video, I was like, oh no, this is clearly anxiety and fear, because you can see in the video that my daughter's fine and safe and not in any danger, not exhibiting any signs of being in danger. Like she's a baby. She's an infant in these, and she's being her normal, consistent self in all the videos. And you can see this hyperactive, survival mode of, protective mode. It's definitely starts bleeding into the smothering realm. Like you can really see me helicoptering and letting my fear completely cloud over the moment, to the point where, I'll be honest with you, I wasn't present in those moments. Sometimes I would black out because I would be so consumed by my fear that I, without realizing it, because even though I'm using my eyes in the moment to look at her, I wasn't really seeing her. I wasn't really taking any of it in at all. And so when I very first started really being truthful with myself about my anxieties, I started opening up more and more to friends and my husband, my partner, and I was able to start really tracing the roots of my worries and anxieties to this constant fear of dying. Could be me, could be a loved one. It changes moment to moment. Sometimes it's everybody. But I really, really started tracing it to this constant, and I mean constant fear of death. Every moment was about getting to the next moment or feeling guilty and beating myself up about missing out on the moments because I had been wrapped up in fear and anxieties. And thus, you have my neighbors, the really nasty cycle that I was on, the really tough kind of carousel that I found myself stuck on. Now, put a pin in this part of the story, okay? This is me when I'm about 29-ish years old, okay? Put a pin in this. We're going to go back in time a little bit. I have lost a lot of people in my life. It has been brought to my attention more than once. The first time was by 2 different therapists. It has been brought to my attention more than once that myself and a lot of my friends that I grew up with, we have experienced a higher than average amount of death and therefore grief in our lives. A lot of people from my childhood, all the way from people I've known since elementary school, middle school, and high school. And it's a lot. It's a lot of people. And it stems back years. And before that, I have lost many family members. I've lost many, many family members. A lot of them were older. Some of them, uncharacteristically for their age passed away, meaning like they were unhealthy. They had these aren't 100-year-old people I'm talking about is what I mean. And so there was a lot of unexpected death and therefore unexpected grief throughout my life up until this day. 2021, particularly, it was actually a particularly big year of death for myself and my husband, actually. We lost a particularly large amount of people this year, and really in the last 5 years in general. I digress. So it made sense to me. The reason I'm telling you all this is, once I had a couple of therapists say this to me for a long, long time, I was like, oh, well, that's why I have anxieties. That's why I have the fears that I do. Great. Mystery solved. False. The mystery was not solved, not even a little bit. And to be honest, just spoiler alert, mystery's still totally not solved. I'm not perfect. I've come a long way, and I will always continue investing in my time and my money and resources into my mental health, so that I support myself and my anxieties and my fears and things like that, or working through them, I should say. But there definitely was this point where I was like, oh, well, that's where it comes from. So, but that sucks. I guess this is how I am. How many of you has that happened to where you find the root, right? And you're like, oh, yeah, well, it's because of my fear of this. And I guess that's why I feel anxiety and fear around it. So I guess, that's my fear. I was called over and over and over and over again, times infinity, to death work. Meaning, and when I say that, I really mean working with the concept of death, okay? How did I know I was being called, you ask? So it was actually really funny. I was not looking for it. I'll tell you that much. That's the beautiful part about these stories, isn't it? I just got like the biggest chill. So, hi, Hades. I know that you're here with me while I tell this really powerful part of the story. So we're at late year of 29, okay? We're about to turn 30 the next year. That's where I'm at, okay? So year 28, year 29, I'm totally consumed by my anxieties and my fears. It's really triggered by becoming a parent now and having to take on a protector and survivor, like, or you know what I mean? Like, provide survival and safety to someone. That's what I mean by survivor mode. I didn't feel like I was dying, just to clarify. I mean, like, keeping a living thing alive and thriving. You can't just keep a kid alive. That's not part of the deal. I mean, it's part of the deal, but you got to also help that being thrive and grow. I mean, you better, if you're choosing to be a parent, you better fucking sign on to that responsibility. I'll full blown admit that personal opinion. And so year 28, year 29, I'm totally overwhelmed and consumed by the anxieties of my fears, and specifically rooted to me dying, my husband dying, my daughter dying, like my dog dying, the list could go on and on and on. I was consumed almost every moment of every day, like I had said. Well, fast forward to end of 29-ish, okay? And I am really, really seeking my patron deity. So I was at a point in my witchcraft practice that I was ready. Like, I felt so called to deity worship. Specifically for me, if you've listened to the show, you know that pretty much at the root of it, I'm overall a Hellenistic witch. There are many other mythologies and cultures that I'm super fascinated by, and I work with some of the energies. But I have always, since I was a kid, felt, and that's super common, I'm not saying it's like a special thing or anything, but I feel very, very called and connected. And I just resonate a lot with the Greeks. That's where it makes sense to me. It's how I learned astrology for myself, as I would just put everything through the Greek scope. A lot of us learn astrology that way. If it resonates for you, awesome. If it doesn't, don't work with those deities. But I was seeking my patron, god or goddess, and I knew that I had been being very, very called to that type of spiritual relationship and that type of spiritual path, really having a patron deity. It's different when a god or a goddess is your patron energy, okay? It's a very, very bonded relationship. There's a borderline, I mean, it depends on every person. This is not a requirement. There's a borderline contract, it's almost an unspoken contract at the least. And so this was a big deal. I knew that I was being called to it, and I needed to know, because at the time, I had studied so much about so many different gods and goddesses and deity worship. I was like, okay, and now how do I take everything I've consumed and everything I've learned about everyone else's experience in this, and how do I seek and find and discover my patron god or goddess? And we're going to do an episode on deity worship. We'll crash course very, very soon. But essentially what I did and what I always recommend is I went to the place that I felt the most comfortable in trusting my intuition. And at that time was definitely tarot. At this time, we're in late 2019, and I've got all my years mixed up. Well, I've got my ages mixed up. I have the years right, but the ages. So I had just turned 29. My bad. But I knew that we were at the end of 2019. I'm doing this tarot spread. I put out the intention. I specifically am like, I'm looking for who's been calling to me. I'm ready. Who is it? And it was so in my face, blatantly, this is Hades. calling you. This is absolutely Hades. And the funny part is that, you know, I do have a Capricorn stellium, again, that's in my 5th house. And it's funny, all of the earth energies that I have, well, the specific earth placements that I have, I appreciate this, but sometimes it's a little frustrating. My checks and balances are very, very strong. So that's a nice way of me saying I read and read and reread over and over again that tarot spread. And like, you're sure, right? You're positive this is who it is. And the biggest reason why I was experiencing those thoughts of like, are you sure? Are you sure? Is because I think that that's really, really normal for all of us witches. You're going about, you're practicing this path, you're doing your best, and there are just times that you are confronted with the notion or thought of, am I right? Is this real? Am I making it up? Right? Like let's just bring those thoughts out of our shadows and into the light. That's the self-doubt that witches have. We doubt our psychic abilities. We doubt our spirit guides' messages to us. We doubt the signs that we're being given, okay? And in a lot of ways, this is a good thing that we have. It means that we don't just eat up everything, you know, that we're fed or whatever. And at the same time, it can feel like a hindrance, especially in a spiritual practice, when you need to have a little bit extra of an open mind, right? And a little bit extra of an open heart. Well, the beautiful thing was, and this often happens, dare I say potentially always happens, if you're really truly pure of intention, really seeking deity worship or a relationship with a specific energy of some kind, you will get the confirmation that you're seeking. And that is certainly what happened to me. So I did this reading and I'm like, I'm pretty sure it's Hades. I'm pretty positive. It is, right? It is. Yeah, sure. But in the few days that followed, not only was I sent so many signs, I had so many downloads from my childhood, from my astrological chart, from just little bits about who I am as a person and personality traits I have and certain things that I'm drawn to and have always been drawn to. And it was in all of these revelations that it became crystal clear that yes, it was absolutely none other than Hades. Now, as soon as I realized this, and I mean really go, okay, dope, it's definitely Hades. I was like, cool, why? Right? You're like, all right, like let's dig a little bit more into this. And one way to learn a lot in kind of an unconventional, unorthodox way about a deity and, you know, different themes that they work through with you, different lessons that they bring to you, things like that. One unconventional way to go about that is reading people's personal blogs online. This could come in the form of a traditional blog, you know, like a good old fashioned website blog articles, but also Tumblr, Pinterest, some places on Instagram. It's easier when you search by hashtag, by the way. So you can look up like hashtag Aphrodite, hashtag Aphrodite worship. Okay. So you can like add those words and play around with different word combinations, or different combinations of search terms. Okay. The reason is because if you go looking for some special certified handbook that has some stamp of or seal of approval, like, yeah, this is a credible resource on deity worship and exactly how this god or goddess is, what their energy is like, what they can do for you, what you can do for them, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. Here's a big thing. This relationship that you embark on, and that so many others have and will embark on in their patron deity relationship, is it is so intimate and so personal. And it really requires a lot of trust on your part. It really does require a lot of trust because you don't have something you can compare and contrast it to. And you can find some stuff. Like, don't get me wrong. Again, when you look on all those personal blogs and looking like kind of those corners of the internet to where people essentially just write down their interpretation. They write down, it's usually a combination of their interpretation of both mythological stories, okay, as well as their earthly experience in worshiping that deity, okay? So when you do deity research, that's most often, the two avenues people write about is here's what we know about them in mythology, here's what the ancients wrote about them, okay? But again, the ancients, they were still human beings, okay? We still have to take things with a grain of salt because we have to take translation into effect. We have to take the telephone theory into effect, right? Because that information is so old and it's been passed through so many different people, okay? It's none of what you find is going to be set in stone. It's just not. It's just not. And honestly, you probably already know this a little bit when it comes to witchcraft in general and branches of magic in general. It's at the end of the day, what we're all doing here, folks, is speaking our intuition, right? We're doing our best. We're consuming the environment around us, consuming the information around us. We're making sense of it in whatever way our brain makes sense of it and offering it back out in whatever way makes sense to us. Okay, that's what we're doing. Whether you're a tarot reader, whether you're an astrologer, and obviously, again, there's a lot of research and data collecting that goes into these things. But at the end of the day, it's still however your brain makes sense of it and whatever you therefore do with it after that. So in my research of trying to learn more about Hades, I ran into an even bigger roadblock than most people do because there are more Hades devotees than I thought, but there's still not nearly as big of, a Hades community, if you will, as there is for, as you've noticed, I'm using the Greek examples. There's a million parallels. I'm just using these, in the moment to keep the conversation moving. But there are droves and giant groups and communities of people that follow Aphrodite, Apollo, and then you can even go to their Roman parallel and counterpart, Venus. There's really, which is Aphrodite's parallel. I had found a big lack in a lot of the historical side of the research because people have feared death, the underworld, and therefore gods and beings of the underworld for so long because it's a place and a thing, if you will, of mystery. There was not a ton. It was really challenging. I really had to dig. So I do want to encourage you, regardless of what the subject is, if it's learning more about Hades or death magic, whatever it is, if you have some obscure subject that you're trying to research into, I do really advise you to just try and have patience. Don't give up on it, I promise, because so many people just give up in that part of the study journey. And I'm like, there's more information out there. You just have to keep trying and look in places that people might not think to look. And for me, that place was Tumblr. Now, that's not the first time I've mentioned Tumblr here, and not in this tone, is it? Because it still surprises me to this day. There is really a surprisingly well of knowledge about specifically deity worship on Tumblr. If you're a Hellenistic witch, really great place to start is Tumblr. All these young kids have so much more time on their hands to do all this research and compile really amazing, valuable, and thoughtful blog posts. I can't tell you how many Tumblr posts I found that were literally just giant lists of links and resources for people, or giant lists of ideas and inspiration for different things you can do in your deity worship or things you can do in your witchcraft practice in general. And don't even get me started on the loads of altar inspiration. Really great. I mean, Tumblr's always really knocked it out of the park with aesthetic, didn't they? And I'm proud to announce that they're still going strong. So I really did a large portion of my studies first and foremost before I started actually worshiping Hades, if you will, before I officially devoted myself to that path and to that relationship, which is a fancy word for saying consenting, by the way. That's really what you're doing is, yes, I would like to work with you. Now, in that giant load of research that I did for a long time, for many months, both research, tarot readings, and meditations, really calling on Hades and really communing with his energy and really listening to the messages that would come through, I learned that I was very, very called to death work and death magic. Now, when I came across that term in those studies, a lot of witches that work with Hades are also death workers or death witches. I had already heard of the term. It wasn't the first time I had heard death witch. I'll never forget the first time I heard the word death witch. Oh my God. I was like, I want to be that. I want to be that. That's me. I barely knew anything about it, and I instantly identified. And that made a lot of sense, again, from my research journey. And this is why I do have a spiritual education podcast. This is why so much of my content is educational, because I myself found and gained so much value in the spiritual education content that I sought out during my years of being a beginner practitioner and things. And that's why I'm so passionate about paying it forward and offering this, my spin on it, if you will, and offering my experience on it, because I do believe there's so much power in sharing our experience and sharing our information and sharing our knowledge. Well, now I'm all excited. I found my patron deity. I'm pretty positive I'm going to go ahead and devote myself in all of the research I'm doing. I have decided to really fall down the research rabbit hole on death magic as well and death work as well. And this is where it is very first brought to my attention that many, many people that struggle with anxiety, specifically surrounding fears of death, people that have experienced, again, a higher than average amount of death and grief, and major Scorpio placements, particularly in the big three, typically are people that resonate with, identify as death witches, and embark on that path. So this is why it unlocked so much. I'll never forget reading that. Oh, and people that had struggled with addiction. That was another one. That people that had struggled with death more than average, that had major Scorpio placements, that had struggled with addiction cycles. These are people that very often feel called to death work, and more specifically to work with Hades. These are different fears and struggles and challenges that you can bring into that relationship and work through and learn from, and therefore grow from. A lot of my personal motivations in my death work and in my deity worship is to heal wounds, both in this life and in other lives as well. And for me, working with that higher energy really helps expand my awareness and my perception. I feel like I'm working with a mentor, whereas in a lot of the solo part of my practice, up until the point I had started really purposefully working with outside energies, metaphysical energies or metaphysical entities. Up until that point, I found myself feeling very glass ceilinged, like really, really capping myself at my own growth and potential, because we are, like I was saying, we're byproducts of our environment. That's why it's so important that we do learn. That's why I'm so passionate about the path and process and journey of learning and education, because it is very, very possible, and it happens every day. I'm sure you can think of people in your very personal life right now that make a choice to stop. They stop learning. They stop seeking new knowledge. And besides how dangerous that is, how sad and depressing is that? And so for me, even though embarking on the path and journey with Hades was really scary at first, I don't know how else to explain it besides I knew and felt in my bone of bones that this is who had been calling to me, that I was safe, and that this is the path that I wanted. You get to choose. I just came down off of a really amazing, as always, Harry Potter marathon. And, it reminds me, I don't care at all that I'm nerding out like this on you. So sorry, not sorry. It really reminds me of the Sorting Hat. You get to choose your opinion, your desires. That's being authentic. We have preferences. Preferences are what make us us. And so when you do have, a path, a deity, an energy, a branch of magic, could be an activity in life, it could be an area of subject that seems interesting, but you don't want it. Like, well, this would be a good idea. This should, but I don't really want to do it. That matters. That counts. That's you, subconsciously, that preference that you're experiencing, that's your subconscious being like, yeah, this is in alignment, or no, dude, this is totally disaligned. So even though I was scared, the reason I was scared is because I knew I was going to face a lot of fears. That's why I was scared. I wasn't scared because there was something dangerous about working with a deity. I knew at that point, that was the only reason I started working with and seeking a deity to work with in the first place, is I was ready. I was ready. I had gone through so much shit up until that point. From 20 years old until 29 years old, it's hard to even describe, it's hard to even think about myself, let alone describe to anybody else. But at the beginning of my 20s, I was in the deepest part of my addiction that I had been in up until that point. I had realized and simultaneously rejected my addiction. And by the time I was 25, 24, 25, I would say. And I was living every day in fear and from a place of fear. If you go back a couple of episodes to the Capricorn new moon in my shadow chats with the amazing and lovely Ashley Starseed Shadows, don't forget to go check out her podcast, The Goddess Complex, by the way. It's fucking amazing. She and I were really talking about on that episode about operating from a place of fear and operating from a place of love. And I can tell you that the first at least half of that decade, if not a little more, I was acting from a place of fear. And, I had lost a lot of people. Like I said, I had experienced a lot of death, but at the same time, I had lived such a privileged life and I was hyper aware of that. I really started understand, right? And this happens for all of us as you start to fly the coop, right? 18, 19, 20 years old. And you break out into the world and you start learning more and it's exciting and it's new. And you learn more and more and more and more. And it's growing and growing about all the fucked up shit in the world and all the things that have happened to people and things that you and your lineage have contributed to other people's suffering, to other people's deaths. You start learning more and more and more of this. And that awareness, important. Make no mistake. It's fucking important to have that true self-awareness, that truth revolution. Sorry. Well, that's interesting. I meant to say truth revelation. And what's true simultaneously is that it's really a challenge to learn how to nurture and take care of yourself and work through your traumas and your wounds when you gain that awareness of other people's traumas and other people's wounds. And that happened to me for basically that whole decade, all the way up till finding Hades. I had constantly put my true well-being on the back burner. And by saying true well-being, I mean really taking the leap into my shadow work, really, truly getting to my fears, the root of them, facing them, figuring out where they came from, doing the forgiving that needed to happen, doing the releasing that needed to happen, right? Essentially what I'm getting at is that about 18 months or so, yes, after officially embarking on my journey with Hades, I got back into therapy for the first time in many, many years. I had been a couple other times before that at the very beginning of that decade. Well, at the end of the 2010s or at the beginning, you see what I'm trying to say? Sorry. I saw a therapist for the first time in high school in probably 2007. And then my next time into therapy was not until I was 22, I believe. And so there was a big, long gap. I didn't get back into therapy until mid-year. I can't remember. I'm screwing up my ages. I'm sorry. I shouldn't give you such a timeline about it because that Saturn in my 5th house is making me be way too accurate about it. When the point is that I had been working with Hades for well over a year. And I remember going into that round of therapy with this new intention that I was going to have the trust and bravery to put myself first and know that that didn't mean I was harming anybody else and that I wasn't taking away from other people's traumas by addressing my traumas. Okay? This is important. This is why working on yourself is so important because we will come up with excuses, and that's what they are, all day long about why we shouldn't. We will. For some people, it's what I said. I'll take away from other people's experiences. It'll make me look like I'm being a martyr when really I just have so many things to be grateful for. Sure, we can have things to be grateful for, and there was damage done. And there's damage going on right now that needs to be addressed, that we need to work through, that we need to heal. Some people, it's there's nothing wrong with me excuse. For some people, there's a million, right? The list goes on and on. I promise you, though, that making that choice, that I am putting myself first, to use such a buzz term, mental health first, really ultimately what I was doing is I was living in alignment. I was making the choice to say, okay, there are roots of these issues. And I have identified many of the roots. Little did I know it's definitely not all of the roots. Right? Oh, it's just a fear of death. Yeah, there's so much more to it than that. I truly making that choice was really a choice of alignment. I was doing an audit, facing the fact that there were things that I was doing, people I was associating with, choices I was making, activities I was participating in, foods I was eating, things I was drinking, right? All these things that were directly contributing to my disalignment, to my disharmony, and to my imbalances. And that really was. And it was years into witchcraft. You think you just start this path and you start living aligned. No, it's a long and kind of rigorous journey. It's really profound, pretty much the whole entire way. And it's fun a lot of the times. And it's also really dark. And it's also really big. And it's also really heavy a lot of the times as well. And you will find, and guess what, everybody? That's not going to be the last time that happens to me. It's not going to be the first and last time it happens to you. There's going to be new cycles, new stages that we'll get to in a year, in a few months, in many years from now, right? Where we reach those realizations. Fuck, I'm out of alignment. Fuck, I'm living in disharmony and I was just coping through it without doing anything about it. It's a never-ending cycle, and that feels daunting sometimes. We can call that what it is. The day that I'm recording this is the Sagittarius, Mars, square, Neptune, and Pisces. So let's call that tension what it is, right? Let's bring it out into the light. Sometimes it feels daunting that those cycles and lessons are never going to end. And it's kind of what makes a lot of life worth living. So for me, death magic is really, really about healing my relationship with death, because it is a beautiful thing. We have the instincts to protect and survive against it. Don't get me wrong. We're born with those for a reason. There's this beautiful, like I said, inherent continuum about life itself, right? It wants to keep going. And all things end. And death exists. Life, death, and rebirth. They exist all at once, all at the same time, always. That has been one of my biggest takeaways in my death magic practice so far, is they are all three constantly existing together. They're all three feeding into each other, okay? They're part of a cycle that's very necessary. And they're all three equally as beautiful. One of them gets a really shitty rap. Life and rebirth. Yay! Life and rebirth. Death, boo. Right? Leave it to the Scorpio Stellium to take the unconventional path, though. I want today to be about opening up and sharing a deep, vulnerable part of myself, and talk about a practice that is so important to me and has completely transformed my life. Since embarking on the death magic, death witch journey, what I can kind of catch up to speed on now is I very actively walk with and talk about my addiction. I no longer keep that part of myself hidden and shamed away. I have struggled with drugs in the past, but I mainly have struggled with alcohol, the majority of my adult life. And it is something that I personally believe I will always walk with. It's a part of me that I was born with and that will always be with me. But I've brought that shadow, I've brought that demon, if you will, out into the light, and I walk hand in hand with that part of myself. I know that it's a part of me that's very, very different from some other people that don't have that shadow or don't have that demon. But I also know a lot of people struggle with these types of shadows in general, whether it's struggles with addiction, fears surrounding death, depression, anxieties, whatever your shadows are. Practicing death magic has given me the understanding that I can offer real healing and real inspiration to people by talking about this, by not demonizing it, by bringing it out into the light and saying, we all have these things buried very deeply in us. Can I challenge you when you feel ready and when you feel safe? Can I challenge you to start bringing them out into the light? Because more often than not, our shadows and our fears and those roots of things, I had kept that buried in myself for so long, so ashamed of so many things. And when I opened up to my deity relationship and I really embraced my death magic practice, thank God, thank the gods, because it unlocked some of my biggest superpowers, some of my biggest potential. Since walking with Hades, I find that if I had to put some kind of statistic on it, probably 99% or so of my clients that find me have experienced, usually very recently, have experienced an extremely tragic and or unexpected death. And a lot of my sessions and readings kind of flourish and turn into and become grief readings. And I create and cast a lot of death charts and really work on bringing those fears and thoughts and subconscious actions that grief and death can bring out of us. And I can really offer safe space to bring that out into the light. It's never something I advertise. You'll notice I don't go on Instagram or the podcast and say, hey, everybody, I do death readings. That's why I don't offer it as like a menu item on my services. It's something that I believe will naturally come through as it's needed and when that person or querent is ready for it and ready for that healing. So, I guess this episode is dedicated to all the weirdos and to everybody that has experienced signs and messages and connections with the paranormal and spiritual world. And maybe you were shamed for that or made fun of for that or totally invalidated or discredited or attempted to be discredited for that. Whatever it is, that weird, quirky thing about you that you love that maybe even freaks you out a little bit. I don't think we're meant to shut up and close away any parts of ourselves. And so I would encourage you to have the bravery to bring those things out into the light, like I said, because so much of your pure essence and potential and power is there, just waiting for you to be ready to bring it out into the light and open it up for yourself. It might feel scary, but as always, I see you, I support you, and I'm here for you. Thank you all so much. Again, as always, for joining me here, for being a part of this amazing, magical, witchy neighborhood of mine. I will never, ever, ever be able to truly express my genuine gratitude for every single one of you. So thank you from my heart straight into yours. This is a really beautiful weekend that we're heading into. Right now, the moon is in Gemini. Don't be afraid to be chatty and open up and talk about it, especially in safe space with the safe people. And then tomorrow we're going to head into the Cancer moon just in time, of course, because on Monday we officially have the Cancer full moon. Okay, we're at the very tail end of Capricorn season here. So really focus on this weekend things that you are ready to release. What can you let go of that's holding you back from facing what you're afraid of? Okay, that's what I want this episode to inspire. What are your shadows? What are those things in your 10-year challenge, if you will, that you've been afraid to face and talk about and bring out into the light? What shame can you let go of surrounding that? I'm really excited for all of you. This is going to be a beautiful Cancer full moon. Everybody, thank you so much for being your beautiful, beautiful, enchanting selves. Stay safe, every single one of you, and you stay magical out there.